Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're so excited to be here and to talk about exercising your way to brain fitness. And we're going to get started in a minute. And I think what we'll do is if you have questions, we'll wait till the end of our presentation to take any questions or comments. But we also want to make this as interactive as possible. And we're going to start by asking you to take a moment and to go and turn to your neighbor, preferably somebody that you didn't arrive here with, somebody that you don't know, and introduce yourself to your neighbor and just find out one thing about your neighbor that you would like to know. You can tell them anything, maybe what you had for dinner last night or where you'd like to travel to. Just take one moment to do that and then we'll continue, okay? Thanks. This is really great. This is going to be so, you are already on your way to improved brain fitness just right now. So you're welcome. Okay, so now I'm going to have Larry go ahead and give us some more info and continue with our presentation, okay? Thank you.
Christine. Hello, everybody. So, at the end of this presentation, our goal is for everybody here to have a working knowledge of brain anatomy and function, learn the scientifically proven strategies to improve brain fitness, and understand how the latest research on aging and cognitive health separates myth from fact. So you guys are going to learn good things today. So we're going to start off with basic brain anatomy. So things what you really want to think about is cells that fire together, wire together. And you want to think of the brain circuits as friendships. So if you think about it, think about the friends that you don't really speak to anymore and the ones that you do hold really tight friendships with. Those that are maintained and enriched will endure. Those that are neglected disappear. So plasticity is the brain's ability to change in response to experience. Thanks. So the term is used by neuroscientists, plasticity. So it's the brain's ability, like I said, the brain's ability to change at any age for better or for worse. It's a physical process. So the gray matter in the brain, which consists of cell bodies and branching dendrites, they can either shrink or thicken. These neural connections can either be forged or refined, weakened or strengthened. So the changes that happen in the brain, they're physical changes and they represent our brain's ability to do basic functions. So if you're learning something new, like a new dance, for example, let's say you take up ballet, this new activity that you're learning, it will reflect a change physically in your brain. It'll be a new wire and a new pathway. If you forget something, and your brain also changes as well, and those wires that were once connected to that memory have been degraded. So if you think about someone that has experienced a stroke, they lose, a lot of their brain function, for example. But a good thing to remember about strokes is remapping can occur after you've experienced a stroke. So the first 3 to 4 months after a stroke is the most important time period for recovery. But some people still continue to, have that remapping occur, a year or two after the stroke occurs. So when you're thinking about brain plasticity, you want to think about that age doesn't matter. It happens, when you're younger, it happens into, older age. It's dependent on personal experiences and it continues to evolve throughout the lifespan. And I mentioned the remapping of the brain when I discussed the strokes. So enriched environments, that is optimal to brain development. The richer, more varied experiences that you have in your life, that's the best thing for your brain and to maintain that cognitive function. It could be modified through life. So let's say, you were sedentary early, like in your 30s, and, you want to do something different and, you get older, you get out there more, you volunteer, you take up a new sport, you learn a new language, that all constitutes an enriched environment. And you also want to remember that intelligence is not fixed. No, it's not. So, exactly.
You can get smarter.
So I want everybody to remember that, it's really great to seek new experiences, new environments, build up all of those new connections, because that all helps maintain your brain function. One thing that would be really beneficial to everybody here is to learn something new. So if you already know a second language, it's better to learn a different language, because it's a lot more challenging, and that'll change the function of your brain as well. Learn the piano. If you think about how complicated, playing the piano is, your two hands are doing something simultaneously at the same time your brain has to follow the music. Just think about how much that does for the brain in terms of its plasticity. Since I'm a therapist, I'll plug in something from therapy. So when we treat someone that has had a stroke, for example, and they've lost function in half of their body, we have to teach them to use, for example, their non-dominant hand to brush their teeth. Those are things that we can do ourselves. Wash the dishes with your non-dominant hand, brush your hair with your non-dominant hand. Those are all creating new pathways in the brain. Okay, so now you guys are going to learn about the brain. You guys will be experts after this. Okay, so here's our beautiful brain. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the parietal lobe. So it's responsible for visual attention, touch perception, face recognition, understanding time, goal-directed voluntary movement, and the manipulation of objects. The occipital lobe is responsible for receiving visual information. It interprets color, shape, and distance. The cerebellum is responsible for coordination, balance, equilibrium, and movement memory. The brainstem, that's responsible for swallowing, digestion, blood pressure, breathing, heart rate, temperature. The temporal lobe is responsible for memory and new learning, auditory reception, understanding spoken language, and some visual perception. The frontal lobe, which is the most important part of the brain, is responsible for conscious thought, concentration, impulse control, problem solving, organization, emotion, and empathy. Our motor cortex is responsible for planning and coordination of voluntary motor function. And finally, the somatosensory cortex, which registers sensation to your body, touch, and pain. Now, as I mentioned before, in order to maintain brain function, you want to immerse yourself in enriched environments. Also very important is proper diet, exercise, and sleep. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. And also power naps. There's a lot of good research out there about the benefits of sleep and taking power naps. So you're not a slacker if you tuck in don't do it under your desk, but take a little power nap for 20 minutes. So
That's okay.
Power naps, or just sleep in general, help consolidate all the information of anything new that you have learned. So power naps help boost memory and enhance creativity. That's just a 20-minute power nap. If you go to 30 minutes to 60 minutes, that helps enhance decision-making, memorizing vocabulary, and recalling directions. Now, when you hit 60 to 90 minutes, that puts you into REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. And that's a key role in making new connections in the brain and solving creative problems. So take naps.
Take power naps at work up to 90 minutes. Thank you. My boss is here, by the way.
Thank you, Mark.
Just letting you know, Mark.
Okay. So brain and behavior, brain change correlates to behavior changes. So like I mentioned the stroke before, if you have a stroke, you're obviously going to have some changes in your behavior and your thought process. The main thing that I really want to talk about is improving your brain, talk about the hippocampus, and that is responsible for that is a part of the limbic system. The hippocampus plays an important role in the consolidation of information from short to long-term memory. So you wouldn't be able to remember where you live without the hippocampus. And people that have Alzheimer's disease, the hippocampus is affected with this disease. There's a theory that education and intelligence help build up the cognitive reserve. So if some cognitive function is lost, there's still enough memory and thinking in the reserve for us to be normal. So, that just goes into what I've been talking about previously, is learning new things, expanding your horizons. Intelligence is not fixed. We're always capable of learning new things. So let's say you have a stroke or you develop dementia down the line, even though you've lost some ability cognitively, the intelligence that you develop throughout your life will still be there, and you'll still be able to do a lot of things, even though, for example, you can't use the left side of your body, you don't remember things as sharply as you used to. Just keep learning. That's one of the big things. Now, I'll just go over some things that happen when parts of the body are damaged. So when you have a cerebellum accident, you have impaired gross and fine motor coordination deficits, loss of the ability to walk, poor posture control, slurred speech. If we look at the brainstem, impaired regulation of temperature and heart rate, respiration, difficulty swallowing foods, difficulty with balance and movement, nausea and dizziness or vertigo, impaired arousal and sleep regulation. Changes to the frontal lobe will result in difficulty sequencing, perseveration. Perseveration is just saying the same thing over and over again. That's what perseveration is. Personality changes, loss of verbal expression, your loss of inhibitions. That's also seen with frontal lobe damage. With occipital lobe damage, you'll have vision deficits or visual field cuts. I've treated a lot of patients that after a stroke, they have neglect on a certain side of their body. So visually, they can't see, for example, anything on this side. They tend to focus on this side. So when they're ambulating, they can run into things on the side because visually that part of the brain has been damaged. You also experience work blindness, inability to recognize objects, difficulty reading and writing, and poor sequencing of visual information. Parietal lobe damage results in difficulty with academic skills, right-left confusion, difficulty with eye-hand coordination. The temporal lobe damage will result in the disturbance of selective attention, difficulty identifying and categorizing objects, short-term memory loss, changes in sexuality, persistent talking, and increased aggressive behavior. All right, so now I have a little video for you.
The monkey business illusion.
So this will be a good segue into attention, which will be the next topic. So the study was done by Daniel Simmons, and basically this study just demonstrated that those who know about an unexpected event, those who know about an expected event that's likely to occur are not better at noticing the unexpected. And maybe even worse than those people who weren't expecting something to begin with. And this is called inattentional blindness. So it's a failure to see something obvious when focusing on something else. So you're focusing on the people wearing the white shirts and passing the ball. Didn't even notice the gorilla. I saw it about 4 times until I saw the gorilla. I watched it 4 times, I didn't notice. And I didn't even notice the curtain change behind them either, which is very interesting. So there's 4 kinds of attention. We have divided attention. So that's the ability to process 2 or more responses or react to 2 or more different demands simultaneously. And this is what we call multitasking. Next, we have sustained attention, and that's the ability to focus on one specific task for a continuous amount of time without being distracted. Selective attention is the ability to select from many different factors and focus on the only thing that you want to focus on, and filtering out all the other things that are happening around you. And finally, we have alternating attention, which is the ability to switch or focus back and forth between tasks that require different cognitive demands. Now, selective attention or focused attention is the most important attention out of the four that I mentioned. It's equivalent to endurance in the physical sphere. Successful management of this is the successful management of distraction and multitasking. Another thing about focused attention that we think is very interesting and important is, we have technology at our fingertips. Anything that you want to learn about, you just whip out your phone or pull out your computer, type up what you're looking for, and the information is right there at your fingertips. So because we have this ability now, why do we even need to try and remember this information? Because you can readily pick it up whenever you need to. I know Christine has some interesting information about older adults and the use of technology. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, talk about it briefly now. So there's been some studies done about the use of technology and with middle-aged to older adults. And there was a study done in Germany, I guess, with about 1,000 men and 1,000 women. And they tested people in 2006 and again in 2012. And they did a battery of cognitive tests and physical tests. And what they found was that actually the adults that they tested in 2012 actually improved in their cognition. Their physical fitness wasn't as good, but their cognition has improved. So there's some debate about, of course, technology. There's a slide I have later about, is it technology dumbing us down? And there's some controversy about, if we Google too much, we might not be using our brains right, which from what we've read, it's not necessarily true. So the use of technology in enhancing our cognitive functioning is not a bad thing. So you're good. We can keep Googling. That's the general message for now.
Thank you.
We'll talk about more about that later.
So what made their cognition improve?
Well, I'll talk to you about that later. I don't remember, no.
That's a good one. Another thing to think about when we're thinking of divided attention is, I'm sure you guys have all experienced this. So you can't really concentrate on 2 things at once. So why do we turn off the radio when we're trying to parallel park? For concentration, exactly. So the myth is that multitasking is a myth. Actually, things are done sequentially, not concurrently. In terms of the interference effects, you can listen to only so many conversations at once because it's all in the same channel. But you may be able to listen to a conversation and read at the same time because they don't interfere with each other. That makes sense, right? Can you guys read this? Was that challenging for some of you? So that just goes to the whole multitasking thing and doing 2 things at once. That's why as I said earlier, focused attention is the most important type of attention to have or to utilize. Okay, in terms of processing information, you want to think about teaching someone to drive versus driving somewhere you're used to going. So if you're going home from work, you've done it a million times. Have you guys ever experienced where you get to the house, you park the car, and you don't even realize how you got there? Yeah, so it's just an automatic thing that happens, right? And it's okay. For some reason, the brain does some magic stuff where you stop at the stoplights, you haven't run over anybody, you didn't, it just, you just end up safely at home, right? But teaching a new driver or someone, if you're in the car with someone that's driving erratically, you notice everything. The swerve of the steering wheel, maybe you don't feel like they're stopping in time so they don't hit the car in front of them. Those emotions that you're experiencing during those kind of crazy times, for example, in the car, they impact our cognition and our sharpness. So there's a continuum between cognition and emotional balance. So the different areas of the brain, they work together in unison. They're all doing their own thing separately, but we experience them as one, right? It's a unified experience. Like I said before, frontal lobe is the CEO of the brain. It controls processing, thinking, and reasoning, extension of attention, and activates circuits of the brain. Okay, now I want to get into memory a little bit. So working memory is our short-term memory. It can be improved with practice. It declines with age, so exercise it. And there's a lot of different things that you can do to help your memory. I use this a lot in therapy for speech with my patients. You can do things as backward digit span, spelling things backwards. One thing that I do when I'm assessing someone is I have them recite the alphabet backwards. Oh, yeah, it's fun. Ooh, everybody varies. I know personally I probably can get 3 backwards, but some people, I could probably do more, but some people can, just keep going. I do it with the digit span also. So I say, repeat this backward, 5, 6, 3, 2, 7, 1. And people can just get as far as 8 digits backwards. Yeah, it's fascinating. Those are different things that you can do to help your memory as well. Those are great exercises. You can do other things like, the Warriors just won the championship. So, going through everybody on the team, arranging them in your head in alphabetical order with their numbers, just any stats, those things, just visually, that'll help, enhance your memory skills. I bet you, right? And also, like I mentioned, the cognitive reserve, intelligence is not fixed. So challenge your brain to learn new information. Plasticity enhancing exercises, visual and auditory exercises, sensory and motor exercising involving the hand and dexterity. So learning tennis, for example, you have to have good balance. You have to know how to position your body enough to, for the racket to hit the hand. Just learning salsa dancing, for example, even things like knitting. I have a bunch of it. Yeah. Anything with your hands, dexterity, that also will help enhance. Juggling, yes. Fun. That's a good one too.
Juggling.
Do you juggle? No. Oh, okay. And peripersonal space exercises. Oh, we're gonna do one in like a slide or two. We'll do a peripersonal exercise. So the challenge, you want to increase exercise of hard stimulation, those challenging exercises. And you want to use intensive, deliberate practice. So when you're doing these new activities, learning a new language, focused attention. You really want to focus on what you're doing. Don't have any distractions or anything, so you can really take in that new information that you're learning. Another tool is a mnemonic. So it's a device such as a pattern of letters, ideas, or associations to help with remembering something. So what you can do if you're going to the grocery store, instead of writing a list, some people like to visualize the rooms in their house. So you can visualize the dog food by the door, visualize the milk in the refrigerator, the paper towel holder, visualize that, and then go to the supermarket and go room by room. And that's another tool that can help you remember what you need to purchase at the grocery store. Another example of a mnemonic is, the whole knuckle thing, where each knuckle represents 31 days in a month. I use that to remember. Have you guys heard of that one before? Oh, no? Oh, let me show you something new. Okay. So, sometimes I forget which months of the year have 31 days. So if you start with January on the knuckle, January has 31 days. So it's January, February only has 28, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. That's another tool that you can use to remember this type of information. Yeah. I know, right? Here's another exercise. So take anything that you have in your hand. It could be a cup, it can be your notepad, it could be a pen. When you're holding it in your hand, recognize its height, its color, ridges, design, light reflections. How does it feel? How heavy is it? Recognize it in your mind. That's another good tool to enhance your brain plasticity. You can clap your name, clap on your thigh for consonants, clap on your hands for vowels, the digit span exercises, which I talked about earlier. Try 6 at first and then gradually expand to 8. Just continue to expand. You may hit 20. And another thing that you can do is chunking. So think about how we recite our social security number, right? You start with 3, then 2, and then the last 4, or phone numbers. There's a reason why they're structured this way, because people tend to remember information or numbers in chunks versus individually. So here's the exercise I was talking about the peripersonal space exercise. So that means the awareness of body and space, like a car in a parking lot. So you can take up a sport to enhance your senses, like Tai Chi. Tennis is another one that I mentioned earlier. So I want everybody to try this exercise. So you're gonna hold your hands out together and you're gonna bring them close just until they touch. Slowly, until your hands touch. Okay, so now you can release your hands. Now I want you to do the same thing, but with your eyes closed, and see if they can touch. Oh, you guys are pretty good. Yeah. Dang. You passed. I thought it was going to be more challenging. Okay. Okay, and the last thing that I will end with during my half is consolidation of everything that you've learned. New learning needs consolidation. 6 hours of sleep is the typical amount of time for that information to sink in. Without sleep, insomnia, consolidation does not occur. Sleep fragmentation decreases efficiency. That's all I have. I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
So thank you, Larry. So we have another little brain exercise for you, and this is the challenge. So if you've read this before, if you know this, actually I'll give this to you. Sorry,
it's okay.
I'm taking 2 mics. Sorry. If you know this, just hold your answer, but I'll ask for a volunteer to offer one. But go ahead and read this, and I can read it out loud too. You're in a room with 3 light switches that turn on 3 light bulbs in another room. You can only turn on 2 of the switches, and you're allowed only 1 trip into the room to check which of the 2 light bulbs are on. So how do you decide which switch turns on which bulb? Okay, do you need a hint? So think about your other senses that you would use besides your sight. That's a little hint. And also, I think we're talking about incandescent bulbs. That's another hint. I don't know. I'm not a bulb expert, but does anybody have the answer? Or some kind of answer or a guess? Oh, yes. Speak out.
Two of the switches are up, so the one that's down is the one that you.
Oh, okay. That's a good try. So you're talking about the height of the switches in the room? Okay, that's one.
She means like the flick.
Oh, okay. So you'd go by the direction of the switch. Okay. That could be an answer. That's not the one that they gave us, but.
Where the light bulbs are in reference to the switches.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Can you talk into this?
Locate where the light bulbs are in the other room and make sure where the switches are in the room. Where you're supposed-
In one trip.
Yes.
Well, there's nothing in here about time, about the length of time this should take. So you turn on two of the bulbs, and you wait for a few minutes, and then you turn on two of the switches, and you wait for a few minutes, then you turn off one of the switches and go into the other room, and one will be lit, one will not be lit, but it'll be cold. Another one will be lit, and it will be hot.
Do you want to
There you
come up
go.
here and just finish the
No.
talk? Thank you. To tell you, I didn't get this answer. I did not get this right. So, but that's an idea of using your sense of touch to challenge your other senses when you're figuring out, aren't brain teasers fun? Not fun, no. Some of them are fun and some of them aren't. But it's basically the challenge of thinking through the challenge. And I know a lot of us have that on a daily basis, right? So that's that brain teaser for now. I think we're going to go on. Thank you for that answer, though. And thank you for all the other answers, because you're thinking creatively, which is very important in our cognitive functioning. So before we go on, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our statistics on dementia. You're probably familiar with this. Right now, we have 47.5 million people worldwide with a diagnosis of dementia. And that is the term for a neurocognitive degeneration in our brain. So that includes different types of Alzheimer's, and there's many different types of dementia, okay? We are having an incidence of 7.7 million new cases every year, and this is projected to increase, okay? So right now, there's nothing called a disease-modifying therapy for dementia. There's medications that are being prescribed, but nothing really that's curing or even slowing the process of dementia. And so I'm going to show you this Alzheimer's Association infographic with some information. And Alzheimer's now is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. And the Alzheimer's Association, alz.org, is a wonderful resource for information on dementia and dementia care. For people who don't have it, for people who've been diagnosed, for more information. So I'm just plugging the Alzheimer's Association. And there's other information on here that you can get from the website. So as I said, medications are offered to try to slow the process of dementia, but there's no real cure. And in addition to that, we have an aging population for all of us. So as of 2010, 8% of the world's entire population is over 60 years of age. And this number is expected to increase also. And from what we've read, that number might increase by 21% by the year 2050. So we're in good company, right? And from what Larry's been talking about this morning, or just now, we're going to be wiser as we're getting older together, right? So as we mentioned before, we talked a little bit about technology, and there's a geriatric psychiatrist at UCLA named Dr. Gary Small, who does a lot of research on dementia and on ways to prevent and ways to take care of our brains. He's written some great books, and he's done a lot of testing with subjects. He's done some small studies with subjects to learn about cognitive functioning and improving our cognitive functioning. And one thing that they've studied is about the demands of that we place place on ourselves and that we have nowadays, now that we're getting older, we're staying longer in our jobs, we're retiring later. And one thing that's kind of a good side, the upside, is that our intellectually demanding jobs and our lives are actually, on the good side, are probably helping us to stay more cognitively aware and intact, because we're using our brains more every day, right? We have challenges maybe with technology, remembering our passwords, keeping track of all that. That can be used in a positive way because it is continuing to challenge us in an intellectual way, okay? And so we are going to talk a little bit about brain games or cognitive training, things like that. So as you can see, there's been a lot of research. You probably heard about the plethora of brain games available online for purchase, apps, things like that. And we know that there is, well, from what we've read, there's no like definitive research saying, yes, brain games in and of themselves are a great way to improve your cognitive functioning. Okay. We haven't seen anything that says that. What we have seen is that they can show a benefit to cognitive functioning. However, from what we've looked at briefly, there's some that charge money and you subscribe to them. And really, there's other ways to improve your cognitive functioning, to maintain it and to keep yourself intellectually fit. So there's some that can be beneficial, as you can see, reducing cognitive impairments associated with health conditions and things like that. One, for example, you may have heard about Luminosity going through this experience. So Luminosity was owned by Lumos Labs, and I don't know what year this was. Do you remember what year it was?
Include it. I think it's within the last year that this occurred.
So Luminosity and Lumos Labs were fined $50 million for misrepresenting the company and what they could offer. They preyed on consumers' fears about this. And okay, so what they promised, they advertised that training on their games for 10 to 15 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week, could help users achieve their full potential in every aspect of life. And what wouldn't we want to have help us do that, right? So they were selling online and mobile app subscriptions up from anywhere from $14.95 to $299 for memberships. And so they were fined $50 million and they settled for $2 million. It's big business, though, and by the year 2020, I think, from what we've read, there's billions of dollars being sold for use of similar cognitive training programs and things like that. So,
can I interject real quick?
Yes, please.
So the big thing about this lawsuit that's going on, and what's really important, is they preyed on everybody's fears of what occurs when we're aging, loss of memory, cognitive decline, things like that. And they made these big claims that, doing these games for 10 minutes a day are going to reverse the effects, there's no science behind that. And also basically just, doing these games, they do have some benefits, but they're not sure if it translates outside of doing that one game. Right? So they're still doing a lot of research on that. So, it remains to be seen. But at the same time, what we're promoting is there are free things you can do to improve your cognitive function. You don't have to pay $200 for these games, which haven't been proven to have any effect.
Have any of you created an app for cognitive training? So my apologies if you're in the audience and you've created this brilliant new app. Let's try it out. In the meantime, brain games, Sudoku and crossword puzzles and things like that are fantastic. If you've gotten really good at them, you might want to think about trying something else. And it's a great boost to our confidence to say, yeah, I can solve this, no time at all. It might be an interesting challenge to try a different type of puzzle, right? And that will increase our possibility of neuroplasticity, okay? So what if we didn't need a pill? Thank you. I just had to include Morpheus in the slide. I don't know why. The Matrix, it still lives on. So we talked about medication for dementia. However, There are some other alternatives that we know about. Physical exercise, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Mental exercises and socialization, those are the big three that are really shown with evidence-based research to show some improvement in our cognitive functioning. There are ways to delay the onset. So we know that we've heard about older people. We've earned the right. Kick back, relax, take it easy. So the fact is that our brains need a healthy body, and there's abundant evidence that cardiovascular risk factors also increase the risk of cognitive decline. So movement is really what we want to be focusing on. Any type of movement, physical movement. I just have to say, my mother's here this afternoon. Hi, Mom. And I just have to mention that I love you very much. However, that lovely recliner that we were thinking of, it's not happening now, okay? No recliner for you. We're going to get you rollerblades. No. So there have been studies done that with participants. 6 months of regular exercise can increase brain volume. So 3 walks of 45 minutes each can alter brain structures and improve our hippocampus and basal ganglia, which, if I'm not mistaken, has to do with balance. Is the basal ganglia related to balance, or what's related to balance in our brain? What area of the brain?
About my flashcards again.
So it's all connected, right? So if there's also a fear factor, maybe if we haven't been moving around for a while, that maybe I'm going to fall. So it's something.
Cerebellum.
The cerebellum. Thank you. So I'm wrong. See how much I was paying attention? I was not paying attention. So can you relate to this, though? Let's be real. So this is not attributed to Peg Bundy, but the quote has been attributed to Mark Twain, or I don't know who, but really, okay, if you feel like this, it's okay. If you can feel like this, and I know a lot of us who is like really good at exercising and loves it, just like, okay, thank you, you can leave. No. No, I mean, we can improve our cognition by other ways besides exercising if we really don't want to exercise. It does help, though, to think about it. And I'll say that aerobic exercise can increase blood flow, oxygenation, and neural pathways. And there's been copious studies on the benefits of physical exercise as a preventative or disease-modifying treatment for dementia and brain aging. And it can increase the size of our hippocampus and enhance learning and improve our retention. So aerobic activity is definitely a beneficial type of exercise and movement. As Larry was mentioning earlier, exercises involving hand-to-eye coordination, tennis, and things like that are very helpful. And if you want to carry your laptop while you're doing your brain app and walk, that's a little riskier, but a hand-eye coordination, water skiing, I don't know, I just thought of water skiing, activities like that. Dual task training, so there's been some studies done with people who were on using actually some kind of technology or cognitive screening tool, and also then switching over to exercise. The best type of dual task training is probably walking, though, and talking, which we'll talk about in a minute, talking and walking. Aerobic activity, more about this, peaks in our 20s, tends to decline with age and activity and inactivity. So there's been studies done with physically active men and had 10% of oxygen intake decline between the mid-40s and late 50s, compared with 31% of similar sedentary men. So it's never too late. And so if you decide that you want to start to incorporate some physical exercise, there's something called the perceived exertion rate. And it's very easy. You can Google this. And it's basically a self-regulated way to measure your own physical activity. So it's a scale from 1 to 10. And you can just gauge 1 being very light activity, like Peg sitting on the sofa eating bonbons. Or you can go from 10 to where you feel like maybe you're going to die. So you can gauge your level of physical activity if you're doing any type of exercise. And even you can play a little game like if you're at home, vacuuming, maybe this is like a 2 or a 3. If you're out walking with your friend, or if you're not really good at walking, if you've had some physical disability or something, you can try another level of activity that you might be interested in or good at, and just gauge your own level of physical exertion. And this is really a way for you to keep track of your own exercise and your own level of accomplishment with your exercise. And resistance training, there has been some limited studies have suggested that regular resistance exercises may also improve cognition, but there needs to be more research done on that. But it doesn't stop us from saying that resistance training is also a very good way to maintain our cognitive functioning. So, of course, there are adverse effects of exercise, physical exercise. It may result in orthopedic injuries, increased fall risk, and all the bad stuff. So you, of course, want to check with your medical professional, especially if you've been not exercising for a while. So I should have changed this, not to say old age, but just getting older should be a time of relaxation and enjoyment, which is somewhat of a myth. I mean, we want to keep relaxing and enjoying ourselves. A way to do that, though, is to look at our sense of purpose. And there's been studies done with people to say that those people leading a more purpose-driven life retain their cognitive capacity significantly better, more than people who didn't have the sense of purpose in their life. So that's a very important factor that we want to keep in mind. And another study that we've looked at is friends with benefits, cognitive benefits. So if you are able to, if you have friends, and if you have good friends, even if they're not so good, but if you engage in walking or exercising with your friends, that's a really great way to accomplish what they say dual task training. So you're able to engage your mental capacity of talking and engaging and socializing with physical activity, which is excellent. By the way, do any of you remember the person that you got to know today? Do you remember their name? Do you remember what they told you about themselves? How many of you remember? All right, you're already smarter.
Now close your eyes. Everybody close their eyes. Now the person that you introduced yourself to and told them something about yourself, what are they wearing?
Do you remember?
So that goes to the unintentional blindness and that monkey business video that I showed you earlier.
Okay, we tricked you.
That I showed you earlier. You were paying attention to the one thing that they were telling you, but you didn't really pay attention to, their fashion for today, for the day. Thank you.
Like we were saying, moving, just keep moving. And mindful movement, we've looked into, we did some work on meditation, prayer, it doesn't have to be running or swimming or like jogging. It can be like mindful movement, what we call it, which is also very beneficial. Breathing, of course, engaging, relaxing. And a book that I read called, I don't remember the title, Brain Fitness, talks about a healthy brain vision statement. And it's very simple. At the end, it just talks about making 3 goals for yourself, thinking of a personal statement that you find important about how you see yourself in the future, and how you want to be aging cognitively, intellectually, physically, etc. And thinking of mental goals, physical goals, and social goals. And if you want to build one up more than the other one, then try that. We do have a list of references and resources on our slides too. I wanted to show you a little clip of this very inspirational woman named Liesl Weiser. This is an amazing woman. She actually passed away in 2014 at the age of 99. She had, I'll say she had been teaching and doing gymnastics for a lot of her life, so she was already fit, but she was teaching other people at the age of 99. How to be physically fit, and even doing chair exercises. And she's just an inspirational lady that you can read more about. You can Google her. So there's another book just to wrap things up. People who feel younger than their chronological age do better on cognitive tests than those who feel older. So really, age is about how we feel, not more than really our chronological age. And so we really want to thank also Julie Retberg, who is actually in Europe, I think, traveling, but she really helped us to develop our presentation for you today. So here's our references, and thank you very much for coming. And do you have any questions or comments? Thank you so much for coming.